Yeah, were there any topics that were just like on your mind or heart that you really want to rant on? Anything God's doing in your life lately that you're just crazy about, or anything pressing?
Man, there's nothing super pressing besides, fatherhood. And I find myself in a season where I'm asking for God's wisdom more than I ever have before. You know, I
Hmm.
uh, I used to ask for things and success or, what have you, and now I feel. I mean, I just turned 30 this year, and there's still obviously still some maturation that's got to occur in my life. I was talking
Yeah.
to Will Spencer last week. We were on a podcast, and he was saying a man doesn't really come to that wisdom or at least start until he's like 35. And I feel like I'm kind of on that road where it's kind of like Solomon in the book of Kings, where, God comes to him in a dream and asks him what he wants. Like, hey, I'm going to bless you with whatever you want. And he asks him for his
Right.
wisdom. And like that more than anything right now, I just feel like that's the season I'm in. My God, give me the wisdom to, rule over the assignment that you've given to me and, to do the thing that you want me to do in a way that pleases you. So that's probably the most pressing
Yep.
thing in my life right now, man. I'm sure. How old are you?
30 as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you know where I'm at, man. You maybe don't have a family right now, but
Yeah.
I'm sure you understand, where I'm coming from when I say that.
No, 100%. Yeah. I think my most heartfelt cries for wisdom was when the marriage was falling apart. That was probably when it started the
Oh,
most for me.
were you previously married?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, interesting, man. How long were
Yeah.
you
For
married for?
6 years. Yeah.
6 years, damn.
Yeah. So whenever I was like 15, 16, I started questioning, like, what does it mean to be a man? How do you know when you're a man? What's a good man? And asking my dad these questions, and he's like, dude, I'm not sure. I mean, those are hard questions to ask anyone. And my dad probably felt the full weight of that landing on his shoulders. He's like, oh my gosh, here's my oldest son asking me these questions. And it's like, how do we draw the line in our culture? Like, our
Hmm.
culture doesn't have a line that you cross when you become a man. It's like there's no special age that's magical. There's no ritual. There's nothing like that. But I started caring about it at age 15 or 16 because I was like, I want to do this. Like, I want to
Yeah.
become a man. This sounds great. Um, and truth be told, man, I don't think I felt like a man until I was 29.
Yeah, that's relatable for sure. I didn't feel like I became a man until I got married and I had my first kid. Before, everything compared to that seemed so juvenile and self-centered. And then especially when I got baptized, and then I
Mm,
became aware and more aware and judgmental of my own sin than I am of the sin of other people. And I felt like
mm,
really God
yeah.
really poured some wisdom into me there when I came out of that water. It became very real to me, all the areas I was overlooking. We're all Christians by, many of us call ourselves Christians, but very, very few of us walk the path. I like how you call yourself the narrow way man. Like when we talk about the narrow path, dude, that
Yeah.
that path is like a tightrope. It's not like a narrow. It's people think about the narrow path in a way, dude. It's a lot more narrow than we imagine it and we envision it in our minds. And that became
Yeah.
a very clear and visceral reality for me when I got baptized.
Mm, hmm. That I think whenever a man feels like he's a man, it's probably different reasons for different guys because I feel like our journeys, the milestones that we cross are not always sequential. They're not always the same for everyone. For you, it sounded like you felt like a man whenever you transcended yourself and your mission and purpose expanded beyond the bounds of your own happiness. And it started being about God and eternality and family and legacy and mission. Um, Whereas for me, it was like I was already about those kind of things, but
Mm.
there was an experience I had to have of like independence and autonomy that needed to take place to kind of tie the bow on it, right? Because I kind of had the mission and purpose and vision going already that I had learned, through the marriage. Um, but I didn't have that true independence and autonomy that I think a man needs to experience at some point.
When you say true independence and autonomy, you mean like a period of intentional like monk mode and solitude? Is that what you mean?
I think that's a helpful way to get it and to attain it, but I think it's not necessary. What I meant by that was this feeling of true, um, I would say it is solitary in a sense. It doesn't mean you're alone, but it does mean you're standing on your own.
Mm.
It's like a specific experience was I was on the coast, I was on the west coast of Puerto Rico, and doing some like just free swimming in the ocean. I was like in a non-tourist area. There was basically no one around. You couldn't see anybody for the whole beach, and I got caught in a riptide.
Hmm.
And if anyone's ever been caught in a riptide, they know it's not a pleasant experience. You're not in control. You're completely out of control, and the ocean is doing with you what it wants to do with you. Um, and it's very easy to go into fight or flight mode and lose your head.
Hmm.
And quite frankly, that's what I did. I lost my head a little bit and started panicking, and I didn't realize what was going on. I just knew that I wasn't going where I wanted to, and I started freaking out a little bit. And eventually calmed down and was able to escape it. But if that would not have been the case, I would have just drowned alone off the coast of Puerto Rico, and nobody would know. Um, and
Wild.
I was wearing down. I was wearing down to the point where it's like, it's swimming is tiring, and swimming against the ocean is even more tiring. And I was well over my head, and it was like, okay, if I'm out here another 15, 20 minutes, that's a wrap. You know,
Crazy, man.
if I can't get back in. So I made it back in. I'm on the shore. I'm completely panting. I'm just completely like embarrassed and like on the point of like, oh my gosh, what just happened? And I've got a few beers and some water that I brought with me, and I'm just like guzzling through that, just panting, getting my breath. And then then something visceral inside me was just like, you've got to go back out. You've got to go back out, and you've got to do it like a man. And you can't lose your mind. You've got to maintain your peace. And it wasn't, I can't explain it, man. It was just like, yeah, I need to do that. I need to go stand on my own 2 feet. Obviously, metaphorical, you can't really stand in the middle of the ocean, but I had to go out there and do the thing with a calm, collected mind. And I went out again, way more tired than I did the first time, and just managed the whole thing and got into the rip current intentionally and navigated it, swam out past it, came back through, all with a clear head, the same risk, but just a completely different mindset. And that was the wrap for me, man. It was like facing death alone, essentially, escaping it and then going back to it. And I'm not recommending that for anyone. Let's make that really clear. This is not health advice or life advice. This is just the experience of one middle class white kid from the suburbs that never had to face any real adversity, and that grew up in a good family, and whose dad didn't beat him, and who didn't have food insecurity. And I have to come by it all honest. You know what I mean?
Dude,
And that's a
I
lot of my
hear that.
client base. A lot of my client base, it's like, why would you be motivated? Why would you be disciplined? Why would you strive for greatness? You can have immediate sex looking at your phone. You can have immediate food ordered from your phone. You can have immediate stimulation through video games. Your bills are paid. Your fridge is stocked. Your bed is comfortable. Why on earth would you be motivated to pursue greatness? Especially if you don't have that inner voice, that insecurity. I know your experience, your kind of health fitness journey, you were like, what, 300 pounds or something?
Yeah, I was 300 plus pounds for a while.
Yeah, so you had this voice inside you that eventually built up that was like, all kinds of negative self-talk, right? And then that motivates you. Eventually there's a catalyst that motivates you to make massive change. But a lot of guys don't have that kind of pain weighing on them, no pun intended. What was that sort of catalyst for you that switched it on when you were overweight?
See, I think, before I get to that, I think most guys have a louder internal voice than they give themselves credit for. And I think the way
Mm.
that internal voice presents itself in a life where, you're smoking weed and you're watching pornography and you're overindulging in food and, all of this stuff, and it presents itself as like existential dread and depression. I don't think modern depression is
Mm.
actually like real, full-fledged actual depression. I think probably
Yeah.
90% or more is just due to a man not taking enough responsibility for his own life and doing those things and gratification deferral. And so for me, that's what occurred with me, was that pain was very motivating in the sense that I hated that feeling. I was depressed. I was on all these SSRIs. I was seeking therapists and all this stuff, and none of it was really working. And then, I discovered powerlifting. I got super huge. I was 300 plus pounds, and then I realized, I said, okay, I'm watching porn. I'm eating whatever. I'm broke. I'm overweight. I said, if I have nothing by the time I'm 30, it's going to be my fault. And I woke up and I was like 21 or 22 when I had this realization. So I said, okay, well, the first thing that I could feasibly and tangibly do and act upon is my fitness, because at least I'm in the gym. I already have that going. So it was really
Yeah.
that pain and that existential dread. I didn't grow up really with my father. My father was a very toxic influence in my life for the majority of my life, but I grew up with a very hardworking immigrant grandfather. I'm of Italian heritage, and so I saw he worked in a tannery and how absolutely he worked tirelessly to provide for us and never missed a day of work. And he always came home smelling putrid. And here I am, waking up and jerking off and doing all this stuff. And I wasn't living according to, any kind of standard. So I said, okay, well, this is the first real feasible thing I can act upon. And it was the pain that moved me to change. Um, and for a lot of guys, I mean, the pain's got to be great enough, because I realized too that the pain of change was less than the pain of staying the same. And I know that sounds kind of corny, but it's true, right?
It's
Like,
true. Yeah.
everything that I was doing was not working. So the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Well, I was getting the same result over and over again. Women weren't looking at me. I wasn't fulfilled. Um, you know, I just felt terrible most of the time. And when you're watching pornography and you're doing all these things, there's like a spiritual depression there too. And
Yeah.
so I woke up one morning, decided to change it, and then a year and a half later, my life completely flipped on its head. Completely. Now, I went down a pretty narcissistic route. Like, I discovered the red pill amidst this journey, so it kind of took some twists and some turns.
Yeah.
But other than becoming baptized and becoming a father and a husband and all those things, that transformation, what I did there, was the most powerful catalyst for change in my life,
Yeah.
financially, spiritually, physically, of course. Had I not done that, dude, I'd hate to think about where I'd be at this point. So the pain was very motivating for me. And I wish that
Hmm.
anybody listening to this that's still struggling with all these things, I hope the pain becomes so great it's unbearable and it moves you to actually
Yeah.
change. You know what I mean?
100%. What I share with my clients, and I'm sure you do a similar version with your clients, is like that is how change takes place for men, is most commonly with pain.
Yeah.
And it's realized pain, right? Like the guy who's 45 years old and he's never missed a day in the gym. The reason why he's been doing that for 3 years is because he had a heart attack at 42.
Right.
And now the pain is realized. He should have been in the gym way before that. He needed to go to the gym way before that. But now that he's realized the pain of his mistakes, he's in the gym every day and he never misses. And I cannot gift that to a 22-year-old man. I
Yeah.
cannot give you the gift of pain, right? I can only give you the gift of perspective. I can only give you the gift of my pain, and hopefully you can realize that, or I can help future cast your trajectory and say, hey, this is the road you're going down. Do you want to end there? And it sounds like that's what happened to you when you were 21, 22 years old, and you were like, I see where this is going, and this is not good. I'm broke. I'm 300 plus pounds. I'm wasting my time, and the future is not looking bright. And you were able to realize that pain. Thank God, right?
Oh,
Like,
dude, for
thank
sure.
God that He blessed you with the realization of that pain, because there's so many more guys like myself, for example, who maybe didn't have it as bad. Maybe we weren't 300 pounds. Maybe we were just like, maybe we were the same height, but we were just like 225, just a little chunky or whatever, not very muscular, not very in shape. but life was otherwise comfortable. And maybe we weren't broke, but we had a job that wasn't fulfilling. It wasn't paying the bills. We weren't moving up. We weren't trying our hardest. A few less factors of pain, and we're going to be coasting that way for another 10 years.
That's no man's land for sure. That's no man's land because I mean, again, this is another cheesy perspective, but it's the truth. It's like if you don't choose your hard, hard is going to choose you, and it's going to feel a
Yeah.
hell of a lot harder, right? So I
Yeah.
knew I had a cross to bear, and that by passively coasting through life, this wasn't going to be the way that I got to any kind of higher version of myself, the 2.0 version of Mike that I knew I was capable of, and it was
Yeah.
God. The way God works in our lives, sometimes we look for these breakthroughs that are so profound, but oftentimes they're a whisper. And so that's why I'm in the season that I'm in right now with asking for wisdom is that I'm not asking for a breakthrough. I know what the breakthroughs are. I'm just trying to tune my ear and my spirit to really understand and discern that whisper when it comes.
Yeah, man. So good.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And
Yeah.
not enough guys are paying attention to that. It's like comfort is the enemy. And I'm
Amen.
not trying to say this in a way where you go become like a Dave Goggins and it's so performative. Like listen, like I like all that hustle and grind stuff, don't get me wrong. But I think we operate too much on extremes where it's either like we're Alex Hermosi, we got to have a work ethic like a slave. Literally, he said this. Bizarre. Bizarre. Or then you're
Yeah.
you're thinking about the people on the other end of the spectrum where it's all about self-indulgence. It's like, listen, like I don't believe in balance, but I mean, taking it back to scripture, I often have to revisit the book of Ecclesiastes because I think
Amen.
there's so much there for a man. There's so much in Kings. I mean, the whole Bible. Don't get me wrong, but Paul and Solomon in particular in the Bible are my favorite figures, my favorite writers. It speaks to the heart of men. Paul with just his boldness and how often he declared Christ as King and Lord Jesus over and over and over again, despite his flawed past. And then you're thinking about Solomon, the wisest, richest man to ever walk the face of the planet. And so, in particular, there's that passage in Ecclesiastes where he talks about there's a time to reap, there's a time to sow, there's a time to work, there's a time to rest. And I think a lot of us, it would behoove us as men to revisit that book often. Anybody that knows me knows that I recommend this book over and over and over and over again. It's almost become a meme at this point, especially in the men's group. And I have to really like sit there and digest it as well because I'm always trying to work and pursue. And then I
Yeah.
realize God oftentimes puts up these walls and resistance, and He's really trying to tell me this is a time to rest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Take it easy. You know what I'm saying?
I
But then
do.
there's times where you need to take massive action and you almost have to act like a Goggins. And that there's going to be that time where you have to sprint and most guys, this is why, the guys that I talk to, like especially the guys in their teens and their 20s, even early 30s, it's like, dude, like if you don't take some kind of action now, it's only going to get harder as you get older. And you don't want to be that guy on the other side of his mid 30s and 40s wondering why he just coasted through life, right?
It's 100%, man. Yeah.
'Cause that's the enemy. That's the death of a man's essence, right? And it's like I praise God for the wisdom that I had in my early 20s, where I said to myself out loud, if I have nothing by 30, it's my fault. It's
Mm.
my fault alone. I came from a middle class family. I knew that there wasn't any kind of inheritance coming my way. My dad never provided for me. My grandfather was a very good example of a provider. And so I'm like, okay, what are the tools I have at my disposal? Okay, let's focus on the fitness first and let's see what happens at the other end of it. And what happened at the other end of it was I lost all this weight and I almost became like a celebrity at my gym. I started training people for free. I was in the trades at the time. I was a mechanic and I was working construction jobs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then, lo and behold, I opened up my own gym and it became like immediately successful. And then I got into, my second location eventually. I still own that to this day. And that laid the whole foundation for my future. But
Yeah.
then with that came a different kind of responsibility, right? Um, I knew that if I didn't quote unquote eat shit throughout my 20s and not
Yeah.
live like a degenerate, I lived like a degenerate sexually, but in
Right.
terms of finances, I wasn't going out there popping bands and popping bottles at the club and all
Right.
this stuff. Like I bought some cars and stuff, but eventually I sold them and I lived like a monk throughout my 20s because I knew I was going to be a father by the time I was 27, 28, 29, 30, whatever. and I needed to have a platform. And you know what's pretty funny is that the week after my 28th birthday, my wife was hovering over me and she was like, "Hey, I'm pregnant." And I was like, right at 28, dude. And I'm like, okay, let's go. So praise God for that perspective. Bought
Yeah.
her, we weren't married at the time. Unfortunately, we had sex but before marriage.
Right.
And we saw the fruits of that in the beginnings of our marriage because we sowed seeds of chaos. Thankfully, we're through that season. Praise God by the grace of God. And so after that, married her, bought a vehicle, bought a home, did all the things, moved in, bought furniture. So it's like, man, if I didn't do that, if there wasn't that gratification deferral that started with the fitness, dude, like I hate to think about where my life would be at the present. I got two beautiful girls. I got a home that I built for my family. I work from home fully now. I can be with them. And just saying it out loud makes me kind of kick myself for some of the times that I'm not as grateful and I'm working so hard for
Mm.
the future.
Yeah.
Because, I like this really, I really like this quote is that anxiety is atheism in action. And that kicked me when I read that quote. Now you could go at that from multiple different angles. Um,
It's
but
practical atheism. It's saying,
it's
hey,
practical. Yeah, exactly.
I'm
Exactly.
gonna
Well
sit
said.
with my I'm gonna sit with all my problems and pretend like I'm God and I'm the only one who can fix them.
Yeah.
And that's what causes anxiety. Whereas, Philippians 3, I believe, is, cast your cares like upon the Lord, for he cares for you. Worry
Mhm.
for nothing, but with everything in prayer and thanksgiving. Cast those cares before God, right? So it's practical atheism to say, hey, God, I know you're up there, but I'm not really gonna let you handle my stuff. I'm gonna just be God here.
That's well said. And I often I struggle with, and this is maybe something that you could maybe shed some light on here. I struggle with often what does tangibly trusting God and still putting in the work look like?
Oh,
Because
so good, man.
right, all I know is working long hours
Yep.
and trying to force things and make it happen. I
Yep.
will things into existence, but then I understand I've had business ventures that failed, that had things that failed, and ultimately like, that's God putting up roadblocks purposefully. So tangibly, what does that look like? Because it's like I don't know what that is. If somebody were
Yep.
to ask me, okay, it's like, well, continue to build brick by brick and tick off those tasks, but trust that God's going to take care of the seeds that you're planting. That's about as
Yep.
far as I've gone with that.
Oh man. Oh, it's so good. I'm barely scratching the surface of that in my own life too. But some really, really cool paradoxes in the Bible that speak to this. And I'll give you a few that are top of mind, but one is my favorite is Proverbs 21:31, and that's of course Solomon, right? The horse is prepared for the day of battle, but
Hmm.
deliverance is of the Lord. So it's this dichotomy. And you have some guys who they are 225 pounds. They do have a job that they're not very happy with, and they are kind of self-medicating in comfort. And they're only focused on the second half of that verse. Oh, deliverance is from the Lord, right?
Hmm.
And then you have guys like you, guys like me, and all we're obsessed with is preparing the horse, preparing the chariot, making sure our armor's on, making sure all of our I's are dotted and T's are crossed, right? And we forget that deliverance comes from the Lord, but that verse has two halves, right?
Hmm.
And so our ability to hold both and say, you know what? I if I'm fighting a battle that I think I can win on my own strength, then I am being a practical atheist. If I'm fighting a battle that I think I can handle, then is God even on my side? Like, am I living in ignorance of the fact that God is with me? Probably so, right? And so you're biting off more than you can chew in faith, and you're saying the battle belongs to God, victory belongs to God, but that doesn't absolve me of my responsibility to prepare the horse, to prepare the chariot, right? And so it's a tough balance, but it's both. And it's not I hate the word balance because when people say balance, it connotes this 50-50 balance. No, it's 100-100 balance. It's
Yeah.
full tilt on both. Another dichotomy that's really stood out to me lately is the old story of the fiery furnace, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These guys are Israelites. They're in for listeners who don't know, these are Israelites in the Old Testament. There's a story of they're in captivity in Babylon, and the king is saying, "Hey guys, everybody has to worship this big statue of me. You have to bow down and worship it. And by the way, if you don't, you're going to get thrown into this massive, like, think like a crematory, like super hot fire. You're all going to get like thrown in there and burnt alive, right? And of course, everything comes to a head. And the three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they are like, "Hey, sorry, dude, we're not worshiping your statue." It says, "Hey, no lie, I'm going to throw you in this thing. I don't want to. Don't make me do it." And here's what they say. They say, "We're confident that our God will deliver us from the flames. But even if he doesn't, we're still not bowing." And that does not make logical sense. Okay, are you confident he's going to deliver you, or are you not? They are confident, but even if it doesn't happen, we're still not bowing, right? And so it's this.
Dude, love it. I love that story, man.
It's like this dichotomy. It's like, God, I feel led to act with boldness and with faith here, and to trust you with the outcome. And I fully realize that you may not deliver, and I'm doing it anyways.
Yeah, and I think at the heart of that is just submission to his will.
Right.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
I think in that story, and I think it's a beautiful story. My pastor did a sermon on that a month or two back, and I remember it, and it was powerful. Because either way, they're like, whether the flames destroy us or not, it's your will, it's not mine. But I think for a lot of Christians, where the rubber doesn't meet the road, is where they expect to passively sit back and just think that God is going to lay out this path before them. But when we know what Paul said in Thessalonians, that a man that does not work does not deserve to eat,
Yep.
right? It's like
Yep.
we've got to do the things. And sometimes that's where I struggle. I'm like, okay, am I doing too much? What am I supposed to do? But oftentimes it's not that complicated. I think we overthink. I think we overthink that process. It may look different for some of us at the ground level. For some guys that are still watching pornography and that are overweight, whatever, like that's your ground zero. Like that's what you need to focus on first. For guys like you and myself, we're further down the line in that way. We kind of know the tasks we need to tick off, and all we're doing there is planting seeds. That's all we're trying to do. Whether it's like a YouTube video or it's an Instagram reel, it's those daily little wins, and you're like, okay, God, like I'm doing this stuff faithfully.
Yep.
I'm trying to be a good steward of what I do have, knowing that the blessings are already here and there are more blessings to come if that's your will for me. And you're going to make this thing grow if it's meant to grow. And I think us as men, especially, guys with testosterone that are lifting weights, we think we have this control over our lives when we don't have nearly as much control as we think that we do. And I found this out the hard way. Me and Brendan were, opening this Brotherhood 2.0. And we had all this huge elaborate plan for it, and then we executed upon it, and then it fell flat on its face. And I think the reason why it fell flat on its face was, first of all, it wasn't God's will. And I personally, I can't speak for him, but I personally put way too much stock in it, that it became like idolatrous for me. And
Yeah.
anything that captivates a heart that isn't God is idolatry.
Right.
So, right. And then I had to really take a step back and say, okay, God, I see you. I know this is part of entrepreneurship, but there's a greater spiritual lesson to be had here as well. Is that I was trying to force your will, and there's no forcing God's will.
That's right. Yeah.
Hard one to give up.
Yeah. Yeah. That's funny, man. It's with new strength comes new challenges, right? It's like you start getting in shape, you start getting your fitness right, finances right, etc. And then you start to like, oh, maybe I can do this. And you start to sit in the captain's chair of your own life and kind of put God to the side. And it's real easy, man. It's real easy to do. So I've done it too. I don't blame you at all. I'm curious. I want to switch gears a little bit. And I know we both talk to a lot of guys about the dating game or women and, finding the trad wife. I know you and Brendan just did a great episode on that. It just came out recently.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was solid. Hearing you guys talk is also great. You guys have a great dynamic. But so I want to talk about the fact, and I don't know if you've explicitly gone over this with your clients or not, but you and I both know it's the same guys that are like looking for game or pickup lines or flirtation advice. Like, let's make something really clear. if you need that, it just means that you're socially inept. It's not
Pretty
that
much.
you're good with it's not that you're good with guys and that you're great at introducing yourself to a room of strangers and that you're confident in the boardroom meetings and that you can go up to a stranger and introduce yourself, but all of a sudden with women you just are off the rails. That's not how that works. Like
I agree.
you don't need magic pickup lines. You just need to be a better social human, right? It's like a lot of these guys that are paying money for courses on like game or red pill tactics or these things. It's like, dude, you don't even have male friends you hang out with on a regular basis. You have conversations with other humans at work or you're having them behind a screen and that's it. And then you're surprised when you can't muster up confidence to go talk to a girl, right?
Yeah, totally.
What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on that whole dynamic of game and pickup? Because something you said that I really liked on that latest podcast with Brendan was like, dude, you just go up and you like introduce yourself and you talk, right?
That's pretty much it. And I know I already hear guys screaming, "What if you're not, traditionally good looking and all this stuff?" I'm like, well, the same thing applies. Like, yeah, like women are not as visually oriented toward a physical attractiveness and like as we are, but they still are to a degree. This is why I tell every guy, like, well, it would behoove you for many reasons to get into the gym, but let's just put that aside for a second. Needing game and tactics, you are inevitably going to trip over those tactics at some point because we're dynamic creatures. Like, we don't follow a script. It's like trying to sell your course or your product, having to use this line by line script. What if they ask a question that's off script? What if there's no way to properly navigate it? Like, just like you said, you have low social EQ, social IQ, and you're socially inept. Now, there's a couple of practical things that I tell the guys that I work with is that you want to come across as a man. Let's just start there, right?
Fair.
So posture, stop fidgeting. Yeah, spread yourself out, sit like a man, upright and tall, don't slump. When you're making eye contact with her, make sure she breaks eye contact first. I mean, those are all very practical things that incite a biological reaction. When you talk, speak slowly, don't be high pitched, don't speak from your nose, speak from your diaphragm and in your chest. Speak with your balls.
Yeah.
Beyond that, okay?
Yeah.
All it takes, because women love masculine frame. Well, part of masculine frame is a man that's like sort of taking charge for his own life, and taking initiative. So if you go up to a woman, dude, it's been astonishing the times that I've approached women in public. The more attractive the woman, by the way, the less they've been approached.
Right.
They're almost always completely flabbergasted, do not know how to handle themselves in the presence of a guy that's actually approached them.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so, right, and I've never looked up one-liners or anything like that. I don't think it takes that stuff, dude.
And
I don't think you need game.
Tell me this. How many times have you gone up to that beautiful woman? I mean, this is obviously in the past of Mike. Mike is married now. He's not doing this anymore. But in the past, right, when you were eligible for approaching, how many times did you go up to the beautiful woman that doesn't get approached as much and you pay her a compliment and then she's like taken aback and then she's all, wait, what? She like,
Every time.
Right. She fumbles. It's like,
Every single time.
You're like, girl, I didn't stutter. You just need to hear it again.
Oh, dude. Oh, man. Absolutely. And then you really see the emotionality and the essence of a woman come out immediately. They don't know what to do with themselves. They're just like, they're all over the place. They're touching their hair. They're touching their face. They're fumbling. They're turning red.
Yeah.
This literally happened every single time I would do that.
Yeah. I had a feeling it did. I was like, I know Mike's experienced this. You're like, I think one time I approached with like, I was at a coffee shop, right? Which, by the way, guys, don't do this at bars.
Yeah,
go to a coffee shop. Go to a bookstore. That's where your future wife is. Yep. She may be at a bar with some friends one night to celebrate somebody's birthday, but it's going to be very rare that you're going to find her at a bar, okay?
Yeah.
Like, go to a coffee shop, find a beautiful girl, make sure that she's not, like, in this awkward social context where it's going to make her feel weird to, like, talk to you. And then I went up to this girl. I said, what is a girl as pretty as you doing out alone on a weekend? That's what I said, something like that. And she was just like, what'd you say?
Oh.
like I know you heard me because I was clear and I was confident. And so, I had to repeat myself and I was kind of silly with it, right? Like, being really slow and intentional and drawing out every word. But yeah, it's like they really don't know what to do with a confident man. It's crazy.
No, they don't.
They're used to the swipes and the sliding into the DMs and stuff. And guys, it's really that simple. And to Mike's point earlier, it's like, yeah, being tall, sure, that helps. Being, having better looks, that definitely is going to help you too. Dressing, having good fashion, like clothes that fit you. We'll put it that way. I don't need you to be wearing fancy schmancy stuff, but yeah, there's a lot of things that add to it. But here's the truth. At the end of the day, if a girl is into you, you can have a great pickup line or a terrible one, and she's still gonna appreciate the confidence and the approach. You can say, "Hi, my name is Luke. I'd like to introduce myself. I thought you were cute." That's all you need. And if she's into you, that's not gonna mess it up. It's not like this thing of like, oh, I have to deliver this certain line and that's going to decide whether or not she's into me. No.
Exactly.
No, you deliver the line, and if she's into you, she'll respond, right? It's not about the specific words. It's not about the specific manipulation sort of tactics or like jokes or whatever. It's just like deliver the line, and if she's into you, she'll respond favorably. And if she's not, then you can't fix that with game or pickup artistry or anything like that. You're not going to be able to bridge that gap. It's not possible.
Well, you can't negotiate desire, and you can't manipulate desire.
Oh, I thought you weren't red pill.
Yeah. I mean, dude, there's some things like I trash the red pill all the time, but there are some practical stuff that you can take. The thing is, right, if you apply the Christian worldview to it, you can easily pull the good from the bad. Now, there's mostly bad. But there's some good stuff in there. Frame and you can't negotiate desire.
Right.
There are things that are useful and the things that are not so useful. Like, and then there's dread game, and then all women are like that, and then hypergamy. It's like, there's no use for this stuff. It's just purely toxic. But you're absolutely right. Like, there's been times where I showed up in just sweatpants, my hair wasn't even done, and it's like I just went up and just said whatever was on my mind, and the woman responded favorably because she was probably already into me to some degree. Like, it doesn't matter. And the thing is about female nature too is that, well, first of all, if she's really into you and she's seeing you, no other man exists. Like, there's just no other man that exists besides you. And unless you go up and you say something so alarmingly terrible, like, you almost can't screw it up. And so, but guys, what holds them back is there's afraid of rejection. It's like, man, this is how soft we've become. It's like a woman saying no to you or rejecting you. Dude, like, I don't know what to say to you if this is what you're afraid of. We're all sort of afraid of rejection and not being accepted to some degree. But if this is what's actually holding you back, man, I mean, if you're relying just on apps, like, I've seen it happen. Listen, I slid in my wife's DMs on Instagram. That's how I met her.
Yeah.
And then we met up in person, and then things led from there. But for most guys, you're not going to find your wife on a dating app. Probably not. Maybe nowadays it's more likely, maybe you're on the Courtship Network or whatever, but specifically I would never recommend like Tinder and Bumble and all those places. And I think, okay, listen, you want to use those apps, that's okay, fine, sure. Obviously, stay abstinent until marriage, that's number one, so you can actually properly vet and understand the woman that you're getting, involved with.
Yeah.
But also approach women too. There's some guys in the space, and I'm not trying to disparage them at all, they preach an opposite message. Don't approach women. God's going to bless you with the woman he's meant to bless you with. I'm like, well, I know what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
But I don't think it works like that all the time.
100%.
God's not just going to shine the spotlight on this woman. Going back to what I said earlier, oftentimes it's going to be a whisper. So what I mean by that is if you're at a library, coffee shop, whatever, not a club, not a bar, and you get this little tickle in your stomach to go and talk to that girl, that's the spotlight, that's the nudge from God that you need and that you're looking for. Right. Go with that. Because it's not going to be like the alarm bells are going to be ringing and it's like this woman right here. It's like, no, there's going to be that little nudge. Listen to that nudge and just move forward.
Yep. 100%, dude. You really, and guys, let's play through all the scenarios real quick, okay? Do you think that every girl is going to like you? Because they won't. Like, they're not going to like, I don't care if you're the most handsome guy and you're 6'2" and you're ripped and you're rich. Not every girl is going to like you, okay? It's a done deal. Not every girl's going to like you. Even the best looking guys with, quote unquote, the highest status are going to get rejected by some women. So guess what? That includes you too. All right.
Yep.
So just playing this out, she can reject you. Okay. She can do that in a mature and healthy way, and a respectful way, which has happened to me before. Or she can do it in this toxic, demeaning way, in which case, count your blessings, right? Because that means, well, I'm glad I didn't stay with her, because this is the type of girl she is to a stranger that's just trying to pay her a compliment. So good on you for experiencing that sooner rather than later. It's a good thing she didn't like you, because then she might have hurt you more down the road in some sort of a toxic relationship, okay? You're not going to get Me Too'd. You're not going to go to jail. Nothing actually bad is going to happen to you if you approach a girl in a public place and you say something not inherently creepy. Nothing bad is going to happen to you, all right? You're going to be fine. And if she makes a scene and makes you embarrassed, like, that's on her, dude. That's on her being
And most of the time,
immature.
that's not going to happen, man.
No.
It's going to be like, no thanks. Some awkward shit like that. And then she's going to move on with her life. Like that's how it's going to go.
Yeah. And a lot of you guys are afraid of something you've never experienced, by the way. Like, you're afraid of something that you haven't experienced. You need to go and experience it, and then you're going to realize it's not that bad. You'll be really nervous the first time. That's fine.
Yeah.
Get some reps in, dude. It's like, and like we said before, if she's into you, then your nervousness is going to be cute anyway, dude. She's gonna think that that's like attractive in a sense. So
yeah, there's really nothing that you can do if she's attracted to you to really make her, unless you start breaking down into tears or some weird like that. That's like super antithetical to, like, masculine nature.
Yeah.
Everything that you do, like, listen, if Brad Pitt walked up to a random woman and gave her flowers, oh my God, that's adorable, because it's Brad Pitt. If, like, the creepy incel dude goes up to her and does the same thing, like, all of a sudden he's creepy. It's all the frame in which she views you. So, like, it's hard for you to mess up. This is why I love hearing these red pill guys talk about how a man should conduct himself in a relationship. If you're taking care of your job, if you're physically fit, you're jacked, you're protecting, you're providing, you're otherwise a man. Women have grace. Good women have grace for the times you're emotional, the times that you're angry. Like, my wife has seen me cry more than once. Okay. Mm-hmm. Not like breaking down and sobbing, but she's seen me tear up. She's seen me in that emotional state before. She's seen me angry before. But because most of the time, vast majority of the time, I hold my stuff together, it doesn't really matter. Right. Because relationships are a bit of a song and dance with that. Now, I get a lot of stuff from guys. Well, Mike, you never talk about how to find a woman. It's like, listen, bro, it's not that complicated. It's on an app or it's in person. And then the number one thing you want to look for in a woman is, what does she aspire to be? Does she aspire to be a wife, mother, homemaker, all those things? Does she hold that in high priority and high value?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a green flag. That's great. Is she a woman that's combative and opinionated and wants to debate with you? Okay, that's probably a bad sign. But in order to really see a woman for who she is, buddy, I say this like probably 1,000 times a day, don't have sex with her, man. Because there has been times in my past I've tried to paint red flags green. Ain't no such thing as that.
Yeah. 100%. To make a crass saying a little bit less so, a great body will forgive a multitude of sins. So will great sex. And if you're experiencing both outside of marriage, it's like you don't know what you're forgiving. You can't see straight. You're painting red flags. It's like, in the fog, a red flag, it's like, I'm not sure if that's right or not, but it's like fogging up your mind. It's like, bro, you cannot trust yourself. To Mike Pantile's point, I haven't seen a reel from you like this recently, but got to stop being controlled by the PP.
Oh, the PP stuff, yeah, that's become a bit of a meme, eh? But it's so true, dude. It's like, men are ruled by their PPs. Like, if you just didn't think with your pee-pee and you thought with your head, then so many of these issues you'd be avoiding, like the divorce stuff the guys are afraid of. Okay, well, don't think with your pee-pee. It'll mitigate that risk. You want to be really able to see a woman for who she is. Don't think with your pee-pee. It's good. It's in the manosphere, it's comprised of men that can't control their pee-pees. So it's leading all to these men down the valley and the darkness and destruction that comes with listening to your pee-pee. Most of our downfall as guys is listening to that head, bro.
No lie. There's so many things that trickle back down to that. I want to hit on one more point with that too, that I know you've seen in your practice as well, but I haven't actually covered explicitly for my audience. Guys, there are a lot of you listening that you're not abstaining from sex. Sex is abstaining from you because you don't even talk to women, right?
Well said.
And you can't be proud of your abstinence when you're jerking off to porn and you're not even talking to women. You're not even putting yourself in a place where that could even be a problem. Like, stop patting yourself on the back with this self-righteous nonsense when you're not even in the game. Okay, when you're looking at porn stars and that's how you're releasing, right? That's not legit. Okay, and here's the problem with that. This happens all the time. Guys like you, whoever you are, anonymous listener, that's you're still enslaved to the porn and masturbation cycle, on a weekly or more basis, and you've been that way for years. Let me tell you something. You can totally go out there and find a good woman, and God help you if you do, because what's going to happen is you're going to transfer your need for sexual release and validation into the marriage, and it's going to make you a weak man. You're controlled by your PP, to use Mike's terminology. You're controlled by your PP right now, releasing to pornography. And when you get married, you may or may not stop porn. Hopefully you do. But you're still going to be controlled by your need for sex, and that's going to make you soft. And when you and your wife have an argument, or when she blows up at you, or when you need to put your foot down, you're going to be weakened because you feel the need to make her happy. And you feel the need to say, if this argument goes AWOL, my PP might be sad, right? That's going to be a risk. And that's how men get soft in the marriage. They come into marriage strong, or maybe they're the promiscuous side, right? It's like they've been promiscuous and their PPs control them and they've been having sex off the chain. And then marriage happens, things start to resemble normalcy, and the arguments come up, and maybe he hasn't had any action in a week or so. And it's like, now I'm going to be a people pleaser because I want to make my PP happy.
And you know what's funny about that? It's counterintuitive, because the more that you're like that, the less she wants to have sex with you.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, if me and my wife argue, I don't think about that at all. I think about, okay, is this an argument where I need to hold space for her, or I need to navigate through through the chaos with a logical conclusion that she may or may not like? Well, if it's the latter, I ain't concerned about not getting sex, because in being that man that can just lead through that chaos, say no, shut the door on the conversation, and maybe she needs to buck up against that leadership for a little bit, as most women do, and then when she comes to her senses, she apologizes and it's all good. Well, then there's enthusiastic sex that happens on the other side of that.
Right.
It's not going to be like the good little Timmy boy that gets a little pat on the head because you're such a people pleaser. You're not going to get desirable, enthusiastic intimacy through that attitude. And to your point earlier, I think temperance and restraint is a massive virtue, right? But if you're an incel, out of shape, basement dwelling virgin, like, there's nothing virtuous about that. There's nothing virtuous about that. If you're a man that has options, you're a quote unquote high value man, but you're choosing not to exercise those options, now that's when it's powerful. That's when it's virtue. That's when it's true meekness, because you could exercise that power and that authority, but you choose not to.
And I think that's the perfect frame and lens in which to view that whole the key and lock analogy. It's like, okay, so you're a master key that has the ability to open any lock, but you don't. Okay, that's high value, because you're saying, yeah, I might have this capability, but I don't need to prove that to anybody.
Yep.
And I don't need to execute on that because I know the ramifications of those actions. That's true high value. That's transcending the promiscuity F-boys that do it because they can, right?
That's well said. And you're the master of the master key. Because if you buy into this master key analogy, then really that master key is just jammed in your urethra. And really what's attached to that urethra is controlling that master key. So are you really a master key? Are you just at like the whim and the mercy of your pee-pee? like we were just saying. But if you're a guy that actually has full control and you can put that master key in your pocket and forget about it, now that's power. Now that's mastery.
Well said.
That's
Yeah.
honorable. You know what I'm saying? Um,
Yeah.
and it's so funny because it's like the same guys that complain about women and divorce laws and marriage and all this stuff and the landscape being horrible and the West has fallen, and all they're doing is complaining about it, and they hate women, but their whole life is in pursuit of women.
Right.
It's so backwards to me, man. And that's what happens when men in this behavior reject God. I mean, it's a Romans 1 mentality. It's like a
Yeah.
debased, reprobate mind, right?
Yeah.
Where like it's this delusion where you're like, on one hand, you hate women and you hate hoes, but on the other hand, all you're doing is pursuing women and you're a hoe maker. Where does that make sense? The rubber doesn't meet the road there. There's no logic there, right? And that's what
Yeah.
happens when we continually reject God and put creation before the creator.
100%, man.